Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace and blessing be upon you all. We welcome all of you for 16th World Religion Conference. Due to the pandemic and the nature of what we are going through, we was unable to invite in person as we desired that, but it's an online event. And the speakers and the moderators are here at the banquet hall. We'll broadcast from here to you this 16th annual One Religion Conference. History of this conference started from 2005 in Victoria, when we hosted the first conference in the David Lamb Auditorium, University of Victoria. The response was overwhelmed, and we had to take registration when we got 300 people, the capacity that it can have at the David Lamb Auditorium. So upon that first success, it influenced us that we should continue this mission of peace and interfaith dialogue of unity and promote the love for all, hatred for none. So today, hosting this online conference, due to the nature that I said before, we hope that Ahmadiyya Muslim Community Canada will accomplish what was desired by the founder of the community. Our regional president, Mr. Naim Lakhan, will explain that part. So we will start the event with traditionally with a blessing, the recitation of the Holy Quran. I request Rukhsan Bhatt to present recitation and the translation of the verses.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and blessings of Allah be on you all. I'll be reciting the first chapter of the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Translation of the verses I just recited are as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful. All praise belongs to Allah, Lord of all the worlds, the gracious, the merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment. Thee alone do we worship, and Thee alone do we implore for help. Guide us in the right path, the path of those on whom Thou hast bestowed Thy blessings, those who have not incurred Thy displeasure, and those who have not gone astray. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rukhsan. Now I request Mr. Florence Dick from the Sanghees First Nation. We know her for a number of years. The elder is very kind, always try to attend our events and promote interfaith dialogue. So warm welcome to Ms. Florence Dix. Thank you very much for coming. Please come here and deliver the welcome remarks and blessing ceremony.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say a few words in English. And then I'm actually going to sing our traditional blessing song in Lekwungen. And that is something that we sing in mourning and celebration in gatherings. But we ask the Creator to hear our prayer. Tiwa sunset, Tiwa sunset, if need come to speak, Tiwa sunset, hey, 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 and I'm a student of the Lekwungen language, which means I'm learning my language again. I like to say again. I like to say again is because I carry a name that's over 300 years old that spoke my language fluently. And here I walk those steps again from that name that was handed to me. And that gives me the strength of who I am today from the Lekwungen people. And I'm always honored when people come and ask to do the proper protocol in our traditional territory. They understand, what needs to be done. And learning from this lady is saying, oh, you're gonna welcome us from all nations. That is not a territorial welcome. A territorial welcome is to the people that own the land, that walked this earth thousands of years, that took care of this area, that looked after the harvesting. And we never welcome our own people to the land. Remember that. Never. They are planted here already. We welcome the guests to the land. And that's any Indigenous people, any foreign people that come and want to have a connection to the people of the land. And that's true understanding with Indigenous people and how we do our territorial welcomes, our ceremonies, to understand one another more better and have that open heart to learn something little different. Yes, I've kept my heart closed to all these religions up until 3 years ago when I was asked to come and understand. And I'm here to really understand the ways of other people's walk life, because I've been put on this path of educating and learning to the non-settlers for over 8 years. They come to me and they ask of who we are, how we live, how do we pray, and how do we get along with other people. I educate them about the traumas, about our living life, about generational issues that continue in our lives today because of what happened to us in residential school. Only the Creator can help me walk this road of life. And I use that. I use this cape and I use the headband from my ancestors to be with me today, to walk with me. Just like anybody that is religious, they have their own ways that they do. This is mine. This is traditional. And this is what gives me strength. And in the end, that's what we're only asking for, is that strength to get us through this day and continue on for one more day. Haichka, and I'm gonna do the Territorial welcome in Lekwungen. Asiam Nachelacha, Asa, Naamtana, Aij Gasiam, Gwens Natachel Hela, Eitus Lanata, Aij Gasiam, Gwens Natachel Tianak. I do want to, honor and respect Robert Joseph for being here today and talking also about residential school. And thank everyone else for being here in presence and online today. Aij Gasiam.
Thank you very much, Ms. Florence Dix, for coming and having blessing ceremony. And now I request Mr. Naim Lakan, Regional President of Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, British Columbia, to present introductory remarks. Behind this event, there are intention, and that he will explain to you. Thank you very much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May peace and blessings upon you. Dear brothers and sisters, we are indeed very fortunate that we live in a country and a society where people from different faiths can get together like this and can share their perspective and their views. Not many countries and not many societies around the globe can claim to have this privilege. On behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, I welcome all you who are present here and who are watching online as well. Today's event is just a humble effort to continue an initiative taken by the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani alayhi salam. In 1895, he invited all the major faiths living at that time in India for a similar interfaith dialogue in his hometown of Qadian in Punjab, India. Knowing about other faiths and having a conversation like this gives us a very broader perspective and gives us the first-hand information about other faiths. We normally do not get a chance to hear the perspective of different faiths from their own sources. We hear a lot from media and other things, but this is a unique opportunity that we have a representative from all the major faiths, and we are looking forward towards a very exciting and informative afternoon. The guidelines of this interfaith conference restricts the speakers to criticize the other faiths. They are just requested to present their own perspective from their own scriptures and from their own books, and just then leave it to the audience to decide upon any takeaways or what they want to learn from this discussion, dialogue, and conversation. And once again, thank you very much for your time, and may Allah bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just thinking some good friends from the East also have joined. One of them is our former Imam of missionary, actually, correct word, from there, from Toronto. He was also speaker in a number of the conferences here. He requested when Ms. Florence Dick was speaking that, please fix the camera. Reminded that he's watching. So thank you very much, Mr. Mirza, to join from that part. We have a number of people are joining from far distance also. That's the advantage of an online program. Disadvantage that no one gets a meal from us, other than we all are happy faces maybe. So thank you very much, all of you that are joining online, and some of the speaker and moderator are here. Now I request Chief Dr. Robert Joseph turned out to be a very good friend, very kind person. I'm humbled by his love for my community and for us for promoting interfaith dialogue. He did moderate last year a conference through the Zoom, but today he was trying his best to come here, but the fog did not let the Cessna fly. So maybe in the future, maybe we'll have such a Cessna that can fly in a fog. Maybe we have some advices for them, but we don't know yet. So I'll let go this. I request now, Dr. I see the smiling face. I love you for that. So Dr. Chief Robert Joseph, please present the welcome remarks.
I'm so delighted to be here today. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to make it to Victoria, but I guess, you know what, there's a reason for everything under the sun. And while I was waiting for the plane and wondering about what it is, what would happen this day, I read this sign on the grounds close to the airplane float place. And it was a story about the there was a shipload of Indian people coming from India trying to immigrate here, and they were not allowed to disembark and stayed on that boat for many days until finally they just returned back home. And it seemed so ironic that I would see this and know that I was trying to get to a place where I would hear all of these wonderful people who are going to be speaking to us about our humanity, about our need to respect each other, to love each other, to celebrate each other, and to remember that we are one, Namyut. We are all one. And if there has ever been a time in human history where we better do better than we've done before and confront racism and hatred front on, this is the moment as we watch chaos all around us and harm and hurt. And the beauty of all of that is that there are people that we're going to be hearing from them this afternoon on their own ideas about the spirit they carry themselves forward in, wanting to elevate all of our common humanity. And I think we've been off to a really good start today. The welcome and the other young man speaking to us, it speaks about the possibility of the kind of future we all dream about, that we can belong together to this place, that we can raise our children, all our children, and knowing that they know that they have value and purpose, and we're not driven apart by racism and prejudice and wrongful assumption or hatred or anything like that, but instead all of us trying to stand in the light and to proclaim to the world that we are better than we have been. And so I'm really honored, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of the people speak today. And I know that when this day is over, we're all going to be enriched by what we've heard. And it's going to arm us in different ways to move forward out into the world and continue the challenge man's inhumanity to man, and to absolutely accept that we'd rather stand in the light away from the darkness. And Rizwan, I've been so blessed to know you, that I met you, and I've seen how tireless you are, and you do all that you can to move us all forward and go in a good way with your organization. I wish there were more people like you and more people like the others that we're going to hear from today. There are, of course, we just don't know them. But for them to all stand up and take their responsibilities into their hands and help us all move forward together. So I'm to all of the listeners, I'm so honored to be with you. And not everyone is going to speak, of course, but your presence speaks volumes and impacts things. It moves the stars. And that's what we're trying to align, are the stars. And I'm just want to say thank you again. And I'm going to listen very intently and know that after today, I will know more than I've known before. In the words of the Kwakwala Tila Kesla, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief, for your kind word. I was humbled by your words, but I think so that credit goes to you for your service as a reconciliation and helping so much Indigenous brother and sister to rise up. And we want to be part of that. And so Ahmadiyya Muslim community Canada-wide is doing that, reaching out to people. And just recently, our youth went to one of the nation and donated 11,000 pounds of food for them after the incident what happened in Abbotsford and Chilliwack. So we continue to struggle to do the good, and help of all of you makes that difference. So thank you very much for your kind word, and hope to build a society which have much more unity and love for each other. So thank you very much for it. Now we move on. We have a counselor, Karen Harper, when we know for a number of years it looked like now, but actually last year she couldn't moderate because it was online event, and prior to that she moderated our 2 conferences, and that way we became close to each other. And I'm once again very much humbled by because of Dr. Chief Robert Joseph couldn't fly, so she accepted the invitation to moderate the conference, and we are much more humble for that. Thank you very much, Councillor. Now I request her to deliver welcome remarks on behalf of District of Saanich, where she is a city councillor.
Thank you, Rizwan. Yes, I am Councillor Karen Harper, and I bring greetings from Saanich Mayor and Council. And we want to express our best wishes on the success of today's conference. And as Rizwan mentioned, I have moderated this group 2 times previously. And what I learned is very consistent with what Chief Joseph was saying. What I learned from listening to the various presentations, or inferred as was suggested by a prior speaker, is that it's so clear that we have so much in common with one another, that we are so much more similar to one another than we are different from one another, which begs the question of why we have the various problems that we're going to be addressing today. So the theme of today, which is combating racism, I think builds on that very important theme, which is that we are all humanity, and we should be as one. And if we have a world that we all want to live in, we need to pull together and be one. Now in Saanich, one of the things we have relatively recently done is we have both the territorial acknowledgement, but we also have an acknowledgement relating to diversity and racism. And I wanted to read that before I get us into the, there's some blowback here. Okay, I wanted to read our acknowledgement. So, we are committed to celebrating the rich diversity of people in our community. We are guided by the principle that embracing diversity enriches the lives of all people. We all share the responsibility for creating an equitable and inclusive community and for addressing discrimination in all its forms. So again, on behalf of Saanich, I hope that the conference today helps us in achieving our goals to combat racism, prejudice, and man's inhumanity to one another, which is still a problem today, which I find amazing at my age after the things I've lived through myself. So did you want me to just start with that? So the next item on the agenda. You can introduce yourself. Okay, so yes, I'm going to just give us a little bit of protocol around the speaking program. We have a number of speakers. Each of them have been allotted 10 minutes. So I just want to say that Their biographies are found online, so I am not going to read the full biographies. I'm going to minimize them so that they have as much time as possible to speak and engage on the topic in front of us. And the other thing I just wanted to note, and it's probably clear to people, but I think it's helpful to say, is that we are all masked except for whoever is at speaking. So we are fully recognizing all COVID protocols. So the first speaker that I'm going to be asking to come up is Adrienne Carter, and Adrienne represents the Baha'i perspective. She is a psychotherapist with over 40 years. Oh, I'm being adjusted here. Technology is wonderful. Oh, now my head's cut off, I think. Some people might think that's a good thing. There we go. All right. So Adrienne is a psychotherapist with over 40 years of local and international work experience, having worked with children and youth, and also with survivors of torture, war, and natural disasters in many different countries. She's had 15 deployments with Doctors Without Borders, and also the Center for Victims of Torture out of Minneapolis, who sent her to Kenya and Jordan. So she has done a lot of international work in this area, which I look forward to her sharing with us and tying to the topic at hand on combating racism. Adrienne, if you could join us now. And you might want to adjust it if your head's cut. Your head's not cut off.
No, I think it's okay. Good afternoon, dear friends. Thank you for inviting me to join this group and share the teachings of the Baha'i faith in combating racism and discrimination. The conviction that we belong to one human family is at the heart of the Baha'i faith. The principle of the oneness of humankind is the pivot around which all the teachings of Baha'u'llah revolve. Acceptance of the oneness of humanity demands that prejudice, whether racial, religious, or gender-related, must be eliminated. Misconceptions and prejudices that consider one group of people as superior to another are a major contributor to humanity's present afflictions. From the Baha'i perspective, racism is one of the most destructive and persistent evils in society. It violates the dignity of human beings, and it's poisonous because it cripples its victims, corrupts its perpetrators, and is detrimental to human progress. Just during the past couple of months, we witnessed attacks on several groups of people representing various racial and religious groups. Attacks included Jewish, Muslim, Asian, and Black communities. Unfortunately, racial hatreds and attacks continue to exist because it is deeply rooted in antiquated attitudes and false beliefs. Any campaign that is designed to eradicate racism must change those attitudes and beliefs. Political action alone cannot offer a permanent solution. According to the Baha'i teachings, racism will be eliminated only when peoples of the world become convinced of the unity of humanity and reconstruct their lives and their societies on those bases. This also requires the abandonment of all doctrines of superiority, many of which unfortunately continue to persist to this day. Many of us may have experienced being victims of racial or religious persecutions. At the time of my birth, it was the Holocaust in Hungary, where several members of my extended family were killed because of their religious beliefs. My parents and I barely managed to escape with our lives. In 1956, we escaped from Hungary and came to Canada as refugees. I didn't grow up with any spiritual teachings, since that was not safe in a communist country, So for years as a teenager in Canada, I searched for a religion that did not show any racial and religious divisions. At age 19, I discovered the Baha'i faith that recognized the principle of the oneness of humanity. These teachings of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the faith, was exactly what I was looking for, but I still needed to know how the various Baha'i communities exemplified his teachings. Shortly after, I met my future husband, who is Black American. We married in 1965 at a time when interracial marriages were very unique and not generally accepted by society. In fact, in the US at that time, interracial marriages were not legally allowed in many of the states. However, our Baha'i communities in Montreal fully accepted our relationship, encouraged our marriage, and provided ongoing support for both of us, and later for our 5 children. Our first child was adopted. Although he looked relatively white, he was considered unadoptable during those times because his biological father was part Black. Our 5 children ranged in complexion from very dark to very light and in between. We did experience incidents of racism, but we had the strength to withstand them primarily because our own communities always supported us. For the next 50 plus years, we lived in many countries and were part of various Baha'i communities, but were always welcomed with love and acceptance. So in the area of racial progress, the Baha'i communities tried to fully practice the teachings of Baha'u'llah and his successor, Abdu'l-Baha. In order to work towards the eradication of racism, the aim became to practice and teach more universal awareness of racial equality and the need for racial unity. However, not enough to change attitudes. Hearts had to be touched by an awareness of the bonds that unite people of all races. We also learned that no nation was entirely free of racist tendencies, so this was a shared human problem. Recognizing the commitment to spiritual principles has social implications. The Baha'i system of community organization employs practical measures to encourage the participation of minorities. The principle of racial equality is taught, and individuals are encouraged to identify and overcome old patterns of behavior. This way, a unique form of racial integration takes place within Baha'i communities in every part of the world. These communities manage to attain unity in diversity. In all the countries, children and youth are taught the principles of racial unity, and they become aware of the problems of racial prejudice and discrimination. The education offered is a spiritual education that breaks through racial stereotypes while inculcating in the heart the fundamental principle of the oneness of humankind. This spiritual education is also fostered within the family and in the community. Children are taught about the importance of contact with people of other races and religions as a means of breaking down prejudices and perceiving shared human bonds. Adults also need to recognize and heal their own prejudices that may have been inculcated by their cultures or their families. Our Baha'i community, for example, organized racial healing workshops to assist this process. Once we learn to heal ourselves, we can then assist in helping others to heal. To have love for all the world's peoples does not exclude love of one's country, but unbridled nationalism and its associated prejudices must give way to a wider loyalty, to the love of humanity as a whole. Let not a man glory in that he loves his country, said Baha'u'llah. Let him rather glory in this, that he loves his kind. In most communities, Baha'is practice their core belief of eradicating racism through service to their communities. At times, this service may take the forms of advocating against injustices, attending protests, or turning out to support local organizations involved in social justice work. True unity comes from justice. We can't have unity unless we have fairness and justice at all levels, and we have to work towards that in constructive ways. For example, when we elect members of the local spiritual assemblies, Baha'i policy says that a tie vote will go to the person whose identity is underrepresented in the local community. Baha'is are also encouraged to engage in the life of the greater community in many ways. Some are fighting for climate change. Some are volunteering with food banks. Many of the Baha'i friends within our surrounding communities are engaged in offering their skills, working with refugees and immigrants, either as clinical counselors, interpreters, or whatever help the organization needs. This brings them together with colleagues and families from different racial, religious, ethnic, and language groups. They get to know each other well through working together. When we work closely together and can share our dreams and hopes, we also learn that people are so similar to each other. They have the same hopes and dreams for their families as we do. They also have very similar emotions. These lessons will eventually help us to achieve true unity and combat racism. We are on the way, but progress is slow and we still have a long way to go. As Baha'is, we work together with other spiritual and secular groups to bring forth a transformation where racism is no longer accepted in our societies. This will be one giant step towards the creation of universal peace. Thank you.
And in the interest, thank you very much, Adrian. And in the interest of moving us along more or less on the schedule that has been proposed, I'm going to, again, very much limit my introductory remarks and save all my closing remarks about various speakers till the end, which wasn't necessarily how it was done in the past. So I would like to introduce Father Lester Mendoza, who was born in Mumbai, India, and he's here representing the Christian perspective and specifically the Catholic perspective. And rather than reading his biography, which is found online, I will just note that, okay, I'm too tall. What can I say? It's all right. I will just note that he has a great deal of experience in the area of multi-faith relations. And that is one of the things that I imagine will inform some of his remarks to us today. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Counselor. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, and peace be to you all. I represent Bishop Gary Gordon, the Bishop of Victoria, BC, who has several responsibilities, spiritual and moral. On one side, to combat sin and promote spiritual welfare. On the other side, to combat vice and promote moral welfare. And in this perspective, we combat racial discrimination. For racial prejudice or racist behavior continues to trouble relations between persons, human groups, and nations. In a very special way, the Catholic Church, like every person of goodwill, is especially sensitive to every form of discriminatory attitude and actions. The basis of the Church's attempt and movements to combat racism is based on biblical revelation, which strongly affirms the dignity of every person created in God's image. If we go back to the popes did not delay in combating racism. Down history, in 1537, the papal bull Sublimus Deus of Pope Paul III had directives of the Holy See that were extremely clear on this point. Pope Urban VIII, another example, went so far as to excommunicate persons who promoted or kept slaves. A century ago, more or less, Pope Pius XI condemned Nazi doctrines in his encyclical, stating in particular that whoever takes race or the people of the state as hostage overturns and falsifies the order of things created and established by God. The basis of our combating racism in the Catholic Church and everywhere else is based on the dignity of human race. For every person is created in the image and likeness of God, imago Dei. The Catholic perspective and the Catholic vision bases itself on 5 points to combat racism, clear, forward-moving factors. And these are based on equal dignity of persons, based on charity, based on the defense of all, irrespective, defense of purification of memories and education. When we go to the first point, which speaks of the equal dignity of all persons, we cannot but refer back to Pope Paul VI, who already in 1970, speaking to the diplomatic corps, stated that we are here as an axiom of highest human wisdom, and that is God has shown that whatever divides us should not be appreciated, should be condemned. For here we are in reflecting what the Bible says. For St. Peter, in his letter in the New Testament, when he was called to the house of the pagan Cornelius, stated that God has shown me that I should not call any person common or unclean, for God shows no partiality. Yes, dear friends, the equal dignity of all persons is basic, not just to our faith, but also to our values. And that leads us to promote within the Catholic vision of combating racism, charity that has its roots in love of neighbor. Love the neighbor as you love yourself. For mutual respect is not enough, because every person is my brother and sister, and every person has to be loved, has to be admired, should I say, has to be appreciated. And this is how we become interdependent. Whoever we are, whatever our roots, whatever language we speak, whatever be our ethnic origin. And this is a way by charity within our heart to combat racism. This is the Catholic perspective, or should I say, this is also should be the universal perspective. And that takes me to my third step of defense for all. We need to defend everybody. For going back in time and context, how can we not but recall the important International Convention on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination adopted by the UN. It came into force on the 4th of January 1969, and the Catholic Church too formally ratified it on May 1st of the same year. Pope Paul VI, who was the Pope at that time, immediately expressed his lively interest and, should I quote, deep satisfaction for this new initiative. For it moves in tandem with what the Church believes. It looks at the victims of racism. Wherever they are, they must be defended. The Church stands hand in hand, side by side, in the defense of all. For they are God's children. Going back to the first point, they have equal dignity, created in the image and likeness of God. This brings us to our fourth point, purification of memories. This is something very essential, for we cannot combat racism if we do not purify our memories. Should I add, if we cannot forgive. For forgiveness is the very root of moving forward. Every faith, every religion speaks of a merciful God. A God who loves implies a God who forgives. Therefore, created in his image and likeness, we are also called to forgive, to purify our memories. The past we cannot change. The future we do not know. We live in the present, and that's how we move forward, hand in hand. So Church calls for a seeking pardon as a path to combat racism. No one is guilty. Maybe everyone is not innocent, but we can forgive. This is why we hear in this perspective of truth and reconciliation. For this is as maybe a non-juridical institution. It has a mandate to combat racism, but yet, in as much as structures and processes allow truth to be established, truth and reconciliation are based on the pillar of justice. To be just, to be honest, to be merciful, because we are equal. And I conclude with education. How important is education today? Not just in one part of the world or another part of the world, but education of everybody, of men and women, boys and girls. Because when we inform, we are able to form equals transformation. Attitudes, beliefs, values. That's how we can move forward. Not what divides us, but should I say, what unites us. And this is the meaning of education. Where education is so important to enable us to enrich ourselves, to respect each other. He is my brother, she is my sister, they aren't heavy. And so we conclude. In South Africa in 1995, Pope John Paul II stated that by combating racism is the only path forward out of a complete moral bankruptcy of racial prejudice and ethnic animosity. We love each other because we are persons of goodwill. We are persons who believe in God. We are persons who believe in the supernatural. We are persons created in the imago Dei, in the image and likeness of God. Or should I say, by quoting the Second Vatican Council, we cannot truly pray to God if we treat any people in other than brotherly or sisterly fashion. Therefore, the Church reproves as foreign to the will of God any discrimination. So let this be my prayer. Should I say, let this be our prayer. And I pray, Lord God, you created the human being in your image and likeness. At times, however, we have forgotten this, that we are equal, that we are your sons and daughters. forgive us. For from the roots of your merciful heart, teach us, lead us, inspire us, guide us, forgive us, so that we move together to be your sons, your daughters, combating racism because we are equal. God bless you. God bless this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very informative perspective on the issue in front of us today of combating racism and how the Catholic Church is, as all faiths are, opposed to racism and in favor of bringing us together in meaningful ways. Our next speaker is Imran Bhatti, who's speaking on behalf of, he's providing the Islamic perspective. And I will just briefly say, because it's in the thing, he has worked both in Ghana as well as Atlantic Canada and Toronto, and is currently in Delta. And so he, again, is able to bring his perspective, both from a faith perspective, but also from a geographic perspective on the issues at hand.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Peace and blessings be upon you all. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the ever merciful. Karen was saying that you can watch and listen or read all of the introduction online, but that's all I have. There's nothing much beside what she said. So you don't have to go there and looking for a detailed introduction of myself. So as we know, we are talking about a very crucial topic that in the past few years, many people around the world have been discussing upon. And I would like to quote who was brought up in the United States. Malcolm X has seen and suffered from systematic racism against African Americans all his life. Soon, he became a prominent leader for the Black separatist movement. He believed that white people could never be allies of Black people in their struggle for justice. Yet, when he went to Hajj in Saudi Arabia, Makkah, the Islamic pilgrimage, his perspective on racism completely changed. He writes in his famous book from Makkah that during the past 11 days here in the Muslim world, I have eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, and slept on the same rug, while praying to the same God, with fellow Muslims whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. And in the words and the deeds of the white Muslims, I felt the same sincerity that I felt among the African American Muslims of Nigeria, Sudan, Ghana. We were truly all the same brothers, because their belief in one God had removed the white from their minds, the white from the behavior, and the white from their attitude. Now here, what he means by white is the racism he strove against in his life to end, the racism that was prevalent in his day. He continues to write, I could see from this that perhaps if white American could accept the oneness of God, then perhaps too they could in reality accept the oneness of man and cease to measure and hinder and harm others in terms of their differences in color. So the wisdom and the idea that God is one is a statement of the fundamental nature of humanity. If God is one, then we all share the same origin and no one can claim superiority over another. This statement finds its great manifestation in the last sermon of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, known as the Hijjatul Wida, the farewell sermon, in March 6, 632 CE. He says that you are all my brothers and are all equal. None of you can claim my privilege or any superiority over any other. An Arab is not to be preferred to a non-Arab, nor is a non-Arab to be preferred to an Arab, nor is a white man to be preferred to a colored one, or a colored one to a white, except on the basis of righteousness. Islam is hence the religion of brotherhood par excellence. It uproots the very notion of racism. The concept of Tawheed in Islam, or the oneness of God, also establishes that God has no body, shape, or form. As God says in the chapter 112 of the Holy Quran, that there is nothing like unto him. The moment God manifests himself in any shape, form, or human being, then he is not God. Why? Simple. Because if God, for example, chose to manifest himself as a human being, then he will have to choose a color, and that color will automatically be considered superior than any other. Hence, this will become the prime cause for racism to stem and flourish. Islam, on the other hand, presents a God who is the only and one, the independent and beside of all. He begets not, and nor is he begotten, and there is nothing like unto him. And this is mentioned in chapter 112. Furthermore, the Holy Quran states in chapter 49, verse 14, that, O mankind, we have created you from a single male and a female, and we have made you into tribes and subtribes, that you may recognize one another. Indeed, the most honorable among you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous among you. Indeed, Allah is all-knowing and all-aware. We are certainly different in terms of how we look, how we speak, or in terms of our different nationalities or our social status, but these differences are not a means of superiority nor inferiority. It says God Almighty has made it clear in this verse that our nationality and ethnic background acts as a mean of identity. They do not entitle or validate any form of superiority of any kind. The only criteria for superiority is righteousness. And righteousness is something which only God can judge and evaluate. It is above the realm of any human being to know how pious or sincere another human being is. God then goes on to further states in chapter 30, verse 23, that among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your tongues and colors. And that surely are signs for those who possess knowledge. Now the diversity of tongues and colors have been called signs of God, which means that all the type of different languages and different skin colors are to be presented and respected at all costs. If we mock people based on how they speak, or how they look, or what they eat, we will be rejecting the signs of God. But Islam did not only rely on verbal declarations, but also implemented practical steps, such as the 5 daily prayers that we Muslims all around the world pray. It doesn't matter if you're a mosque in Africa, America, Australia, or anywhere around the world. If there are multiple nationalities, they will be all standing shoulder to shoulder, side by side in one row. There won't be any distinction that the rich will be in the front and the middle class in the back, or the poor outside the mosque. However, it could also be that the boss and the worker are standing together, or that the worker is in the first row and the boss in the last row, or the guy who you're working for is leading the prayer and you are praying behind him. Such is the beauty of the Islamic prayer that removes all sorts of racism and practically reminds every believer 5 times a day. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, exemplified through his very own examples. Nowadays, we hear many hurtful comments with regards to immigrants. We often call them foreigners, outsiders. But let me show you that how Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, took great care of them. One of the companions was Hazrat Salman, who was the Persian, a non-Arab companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Majority of the companion was Arab. Hazrat Salman, the Persian, was an outsider, a foreigner, an immigrant. During the Battle of the Trench, Muslims dig trenches was not in their habits, and this suggestion and recommendation was given by him. When they decided to dig the trench, the Holy Prophet Islam, for every 40 meters, made groups of 10 companions to dig the trench in that area, and he organized the groups according to their families. Now, Salman the Persian needed to also be put in a team or designated in a team. Now, the issue came up as to where is he going to be placed. Everyone wanted him to be part of their family, but Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, led by example and said that Salman is part of my family, that he will dig the trench with me and my family members. So that's the attitude and the example that he led by. And not only did he preach this, but he led by this through examples as well. Another example is Hazrat Osama, peace be upon him, a free slave who was made a leader and commander of many armies whom they later on fought, and was a prominent companion where we're serving. So the ignorance that we see around the world, as you heard from the speaker, I have had the opportunity to serve as a missionary around in Canada. I've been in Atlantic Canada, here in Toronto, and now serving as Delta. But even where we live in 21st century, when we go to small towns and do similar events, we all have our personal stories that we can share, that we witnessed, whether it was racial background, whether it was due to our religion, or what clothing we are wearing. But this serves as an opportunity to educate members. Because most of the times when I used to travel in remote areas in Atlantic Canada, they never met anyone, regardless of Muslim, but even someone who was not white. So it was an alien to see to them. So that gave me the opportunity to have conversation with them and to let them know, because all they had access was the internet and the people around them. So it gives an opportunity to spread peaceful messages, to spread unity, and to educate them. And once you have a meaningful conversation, at the end of the day, they do realize that what they see on TV or what they experience on TV or what they actually felt before completely changes their opinion. So if you're able to even change one person, that can have a ripple effect of how they are going to lead their life accordingly. So in the end, I would like to end my presentation with a quotation of the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, His Holiness the Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him. He says that, my countrymen, a religion which does not inculcate a universal compassion is no religion at all. Similarly, a human being without the faculty of compassion is no human at all. Our God has never discriminated between one people and another. This is illustrated by the fact that all the potentials and capabilities which have been granted by the Aryas have also been granted to the races inhabited in Arabia, Persia, Syria, China, Japan, Europe, and America. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. As I said, I'm going to talk about the whole thing at the end. So moving along, then we have Gurdeep Singh, who's here to represent the Sikh faith perspective. And he also has lived in a variety of interesting places. He was born in Kenya, and then he moved to London at a very early age. He was in London for a fair amount of while, and then he moved to Victoria 9 years ago. And he's going to be talking about the topic at hand in terms of how does the Sikh faith deal with the issue fundamentally of racism as well. So, Gurdeep.
Thank you, Karen. First, I would like to forward my appreciation to Ahmadiyya community for putting up this forum so that it can benefit a lot of people. I thank you, all my fellow speakers and the audience here and the audience on the net who have taken their very valuable time to listen to this perspective. Amazing. In the 21st century, we have moved into. And we talk about education, and we say education is the solution, but we are still struggling to combat racism. And I was pondering so much on this point, racism. Why are we seeking an answer from the religion perspective? Why not from somebody else? Is religion a solution to it? Is that what we are asking? So that question arose in my mind, and I try to divide into two forums here. So we are talking about God on one side and humans on the other side. So where is the problem lies? Is God the creator of this problem, or when we say God has created everything, or are we the problem? Now, religions have existed here for thousands of years, but we are still struggling in the 21st century to combat racism. So much education and pathway of religion imbibed in all these scriptures, religions, but humankind either hasn't adhered to it or it's totally misleading. Something is wrong somewhere and we need to try to understand. Now, before I begin, I would like to introduce Sikhism is not a religion, it's a way of life. The word Sikh is a student. He's a student of the Sikhism, the teachings of Guru Nanak from the day he's born to the day he dies. He's always learning. There's always a room to learn because we are living in the infinite world, and in the infinite world, there's nothing finite. So how can we learn? Now, from the Guru Nanak's perspective, the scriptures of the Sikhism, the Guru Nanak's way, it's the only scripture that is written with a numeric 1. And the embodiment of the Guru Granth Sahib, Sri Guru Granth Sahib, 1430 pages, it's all about telling us one. The creator is one. We, the human race, is one, created by the one. At the end of the day, we're going to imbibe into one as a drop gone back into the ocean. And if you ask the most intelligent person, the scientist, can you get that drop out? He cannot. She cannot. So we were supposed to understand that oneness. And Guru Nanak, all his way in 1430 pages imbibes, talks about oneness, how we need to become one, what we need to become one about. But before we move on to that, we need to understand God and his attributes, his qualities of this creator. He's eternal truth. He's creative being personified. He's without fear, have no hatred. He's without form. He's beyond birth and is self-existent. And one can join, this is the critical part, with his grace, not by personal efforts. It's his grace. Now, these are the qualities and attributes that God has when he created the human beings. These are the attributes that we were supposed to conceive and build upon ourselves and be called godly men, godly women, godly being. Now, there are countless shapes, colors of humans, languages, yet we can put two people together and they can communicate so well, not knowing the language of the other, but they will communicate very well when they are in the dire need of the other. When they are in the fear of losing their superiority to that being, it is out of the fear, the discrimination, injustice will rise. So all these years, studying the religion, having seen that, we did not accumulate these attributes that God is given. Everybody we have listened to, Nanak also says to us, the whole humanity must embrace these qualities and rid the duality within, which is the root cause of racism, and the duality is nourished by ego as well as slandering. He also said, Manas ki jaat sabha ek kya pehchan bo. Now, the funny thing, I was contemplating on this. The human race is one. Every human individual is made of the 5 elements. They're the same 5 elements anybody has, whether white, black, brown, you name it. When one dies, we're either buried in this earth, we are thrown into this ocean, or we become ashes after the cremation, back to the earth. We breathe the same air everybody else breathes. We drink the same water everybody else drinks. We eat the same food that is grown on the same earth, but yet we discriminate. So Guru Nanak said to a Sikh that I'll give you 3 principles. Naam japo, kirt karo, vansh shako. Basically, live truthfully. Recite God's name and share your wealth. Don't accumulate it because you came empty-handed and you're going to go empty-handed. You brought nothing into this world, you're going to go away with nothing. One of the things that came into my mind, and I'll share this with you, when the humans fear in the jungle of ferocious animals or the humankind, you know what they do? We have all seen this over the period of history. They beat the drums. They beat the drums, and I believe that humans now need to, the religious groups especially, need to beat this drum to eradicate racism. This drum needs to awaken the dead souls, the dead minds who are sleeping in their graves are as walking dead. They are no good to their creator because the creator created this garden and we are not serving this garden. This human serving God, how do we serve God? I serve his race. How should I serve God? Does anybody know if God is in that house or in that house or in that house, in that place, not in that place? God is everywhere. We all believe that. But the most fundamental importance is it's only the human race God has given the blessings upon who can communicate, fathom, dissect, know the difference between the truth and the wrong, right and the wrong. And it is through our communication, it's through our interdialogue, through our serving to the other, we are providing the platform of welcoming, embracing, and giving the room. Oh, I've only got 1 minute left.
I'll cut the rules.
You can keep smiling with 1 minute.
One of the things in basically, when God says, we are all saying the same thing. We need to embrace one another. We need to serve humanity in a very better form. Manas ki jaat sabha ka pehchan. We need to understand this world is one, his creator is one, and we are all one. There's no little difference. We might pray differently. We might talk differently. We might eat differently, different foods and all together, but we are all one and the same race. We have no need to discriminate the other for what they are, And in conclusion, I would like to say this from the Guru Granth Sahib. This is about thyself. This human body has been given to you. This is your chance to meet the Lord of the universe. Nothing else will work. Join the Sadh Sangat, the company of the holy. Vibrate and meditate on the jewel of his name. Make every effort to choose over this terrifying world ocean. You are squandering this life uselessly. Squandering this life uselessly in the love of Maya, I have not practiced meditation, self-discipline, self-restraint, or righteous living. I have not served the holy. I have not acknowledged the Lord, my King. Says Nanak, my actions are contemptible. O Lord, I seek your sanctuary. Please preserve my honor. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, no, why it just went there?
There we go. Thank you so much. And next, I would like to invite Kelly Urari, who's coming to speak to us about the perspective of the Church of the Latter-day Saints and Christianity, and more local perspective, I guess, in this case.
Yeah.
So there we go.
It's how it's spelled, but most people don't say it correctly.
But I'm a former teacher too.
And he's going to have to adjust me because I'm a whole lot shorter than the previous speaker. I am grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you today. As most of you don't know me, I'll share a little bit of my background. I have recently retired from the field of public education, where I spent more than 3 decades of my life in elementary education. I met my husband while working in one of the area's schools, and he was and is a terrific influence in my life. He introduced me to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it was no coincidence that we were married the same year that I joined the church almost 24 years ago. You may wonder about my surname, and it comes from Tahiti. My husband was born there, although we met here, and no, I have never been to that part of the world. However, being Polynesian and living in North America, my husband was subject to times where he experienced prejudice. In fact, whenever we traveled to the United States pre-COVID, when I was driving, the Border Patrol would check our passports and wave us through. But when he was driving, there were many more questions. Now, from my experience, when I first started working as a teacher, I was in an area where Caucasian people were a minority, and so I was referred to in terribly prejudicial ways. Now, as I reflect on our experiences, I realized that they were based purely on our skin color. Assumptions were made without any effort to understand who we were as people. I know that we are to speak on combating racism, but first I want to start with a story about when I was a new teacher. I had been hired to teach a class of grade 3 students, and one of them, I was told, was blind and would need some changes to his program to accommodate for his needs. I was pretty worried that I wouldn't be able to do what was required of me. Luckily for me, I had a good friend who was a master teacher. What she told me has stayed with me forever. She said that this child and all future children would come to my class, cross paths with me for a reason, that I would be able to meet his needs if I was open to learning about his needs. Wow, such simple advice. But it was true throughout my entire career and in fact beyond. When I was open, I learned, I adapted, I changed, and I did my best to meet the needs of those with whom I came in contact. Every time I had a student who had a challenging profile, I remembered this first student of mine who taught me more than I ever could have taught him. As I worked as a principal, I applied the same strategy, although sometimes it was the adult who had the challenging profile rather than the child, right? You get that. I believe there are connections from this story to the topic of prejudice or racism. As I examine that story, I can see that I was frozen in fear. This made me doubt my abilities and caused me to spend energy in unhelpful areas. That fear had the opportunity of making me behave in ways that were less than productive. I will come back to this story. So some might ask, what does the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints do about the challenges that come when we are subjected to prejudice or racism? Well, it is clear. We are taught that all individuals are children of God and part of his divine family. Let me repeat that. We are taught that all individuals are children of God and part of his divine family. Now, as his children, we all have divine potential and are precious in his eyes. In fact, in Acts 17:26, it states that God hath made of one blood all nations of men. And in the Book of Mormon, 2 Nephi chapter 26, verse 33, it states that all are alike in him. God does not love one race or culture more than any other. So then how do we combat racism or prejudice? I believe that this occurs when we stop being afraid and when we love others, when we honestly and truly love others. The first great commandment is about loving God, and the second great commandment is about loving our neighbors as ourselves. From these two commandments, I can see a pretty clear direction. We are loved by God, we love our neighbors, and we also need to show love for ourselves. Recently, I heard a member of my church talking about love, and she commented, "When you know and understand how completely you are loved as a child of God, it changes everything," end quote. Just imagine that knowledge changes everything. How you feel about yourself when you make a mistake, how you feel about others when they make a mistake, how you manage the turbulent times in your life. I remember some other advice I received about reserving that tendency to make judgments. The advice went something like this: instead of being annoyed by someone's behavior, perhaps spend a little time thinking of 20 reasons why they may have behaved that way. Usually the irritation is gone after about the third reason. So if love is the answer, then I guess the question is, how do we open ourselves to feeling love that can be shared with others? When I asked this question recently, a good friend of mine responded with the advice that if someone was struggling, then leaning on other good people, doing the basics, and acting as if you could feel love was a good idea. Another way to increase your love is through mindfulness, pondering, even prayer. Sometimes being mindful about the desire to have more love or share more love or be open to others and their needs is a powerful tool. I personally enjoy doing things for others, so I find an increase in my love through service. My church has a pattern of reaching out to others and is well known globally for their humanitarian efforts. In Acts 10:38, we are taught about going around and doing good for others. The president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is currently a man named Russell M. Nelson. We believe that he is able to receive revelation from God for the world. President Nelson has been very vocal about how blessed we can become when we serve others. In 2003, before he became the president of the church, he commented, "The more committed we become to patterning our lives after Jesus Christ, the purer and more divine our lives become," end quote. As members of the Church of Jesus Christ, we believe that all people are entitled to personal revelation that helps and supports us on our own journey. And as we do more spiritually, I believe it becomes natural to us. We don't have to have someone else reminding us to have an open heart or to love another. It becomes how we behave. And this, I believe, positively combats racism and prejudice. I also believe that when we are open to learning about others, as my previous story shared, we can gain valuable knowledge about others and their cultures and customs. As well, we are open to feeling love, and that can be transformed into sharing love. In 2020, President Russell M. Nelson spoke about the very topic of combating racism. He encouraged and urged people to, quote, lead out in abandoning attitudes and actions of prejudice, end quote, that we could be building bridges of cooperation between every person. This is one of the reasons that the common practice in my church is to refer to each other as brother or sister. We consider ourselves members of greater and bigger families. Now, the strategies for combating racism and prejudice are vast. I think of them as ways we can individually improve ourselves and then improving how we are with others. Some of those strategies could include building your knowledge of your divine worth, being humble, teachable, full of humility, being mindful about understanding others and increasing your capacity for love, and then reserving judgment, being kind and compassionate. Even smiling makes a big difference. And yes, we can see eyes smile even when we are wearing masks. Listen to each other, express interest in others, notice what is needed, and then provide service to others. Basically, love. So in summary, I believe that when we are open and loving, we diminish fear and we positively combat racism and prejudice. One of my very favorite scriptures from the Book of Mormon is found in 2 Nephi chapter 31, verse 20. It reads, "Wherefore ye must press forward with a steadfastness in Christ, having a perfect brightness of hope, and a love of God and of all mankind. Wherefore, if ye shall press forward, feasting upon the word of Christ, and endure to the end, behold, thus saith the Father, ye shall have eternal life." Now, however we get to that place, whether through the teachings of Jesus Christ or another loving teacher, when we land on love, we are in the right place. This has been my experience, and I hope others have felt my love for them. And I leave these thoughts with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Kelly. And I didn't even need to get out the signs because I could see you were coming to a close. That was great. Thank you. Next, I'd like to call on Rabbi Louis Sadker to come and speak to us on behalf of the Jewish Faith Perspective. And he has worked in both Canada and the United States, and is currently at the University of Victoria. No longer at the the bio's out of date. Got updated. Okay. And very out of date. Well, members of ours are. I would like to ask you, Rabbi, to come and speak to us about the perspective of the Jewish faith on this issue.
So I'm a Jew, and I'm white, and I'm a racist. What choice do I have? Okay. You're right. I have all the choices. But I don't have the choice about how someone else particularly labels me, right? When someone knows that I'm a Jew, that starts to bring up already ideas about who I am, what I believe, what I'm trying to do, and my place in the international Jewish economic conspiracy, which I've been trying to join for a long time. And if any of you know how I can find somebody like that, it would help my own financial situation quite a bit. So thank you. I'm willing to cut you in on some of it. And I'm white also. Although in the summer, once I've been in the sun for a while, and I love the sun, I have often been asked, "Are you from India?" Even sometimes, "Are you from Africa?" I've got these changes, and when I'm originally from Savannah, Georgia, by the way, so I know a little bit about racism in terms of how the Black community was dealt with at that time. I was raised by Black women in many ways, and in my family, we were taught somehow or another, both that we were all equal, but we had roles to protect at the same time. And many of us went along with what was going, trying to ameliorate to some degree to not put us at risk. I don't know. I often ask myself, if we knew today in our own families that one part of our community, let's say the indigenous community, was being systematically terminated, would we take the risk? And we knew that if we hid one of them, or if we protected them, our own families could be exterminated. How would we do that these days, including the Jewish community, somehow or another? Will we place ourselves at risk, our babies at risk? I don't know. So I tend to think about things in terms of these dramatic possibilities. My own spiritual tradition, Judaism, has been very guilty, I think, of committing acts of violence against others and having put other people at risk. And much of this happened, in fact, committed genocide in a way with our God's instructions to do that. Jericho is one example. You may think of some others. So I think that when my tradition, when I think about prejudice, the first thing that comes to my mind is from my, and I'm not very popular in many ways for this, is that need to take account of the things that we have done in our own past that has caused other people's issues and problems. Okay? And we need to do repentance about these things, even if they happened thousands of years ago. Okay? From my point of view, that does not excuse us, and we've tended not to pay attention to some of those things, to gloss them over, and to sometimes indulge, sometimes engage in our own victimizations that have happened through so many years. I mean, I grew up Christ killer, kike. The positive part of that, from my point of view, was that if I was walking along with my friends and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Jew boy," and I was the only Jew, my friends were basically Catholic around those days. I learned how to defend and protect myself. And I learned also how to be empathic with other people that had slurs, had insults, and everything against them. And later on in my career, I lived in Savannah until I went off to university, and then I lived in New Orleans for 10 years. I could see how both us, I'll just use Jews for example, how we could be prejudicial and racist to others who were part of our same group. We could have very strong opinions about them, and historically, there were many times when we fought each other and had different ideas about them. And we had very good excuses, okay? If you did idol worship or you believed in other gods, you were open game, okay? At different times. Were we open game at different times? Absolutely, including recently. But that's not the issue that I want to talk about and that I've initiated bringing up, okay? On the other hand, God sends the disease or sends the poison, but also sends the antidote and the cure. Because we have, just as some of us have already said here, we also have other lessons. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, so that means, you know, I should love you as much as I love me. But what if I don't love me very much, you know, for various reasons, you know? That mean I don't have to love you? But also, we Jews tend to be a little bit language obsessed, given the Torah that we read and how there's often ambiguity, even starting in the first verse. We can spend hours, weeks, maybe even years on some of these things, okay? So you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Another way to parse that is you only have to love your neighbor that's like you, that's like me. If you're not like me, I don't have to love you, okay? So we have these two interpretations right away that we can play with. And we can have different people who may have different ideas about which one of those is the one we should follow. So we have other examples. We have Miriam disses Moshe, for marrying a woman who's a Cushite, which some people think means because she was black. Okay, so what happens? Miriam, this is an early example. Miriam gets punished by a skin disease by God for dissing Moses for doing that. And so the very first prayer that's addressed in the Torah is Moses asking God to forgive her for that. And we do that. And the name of the disease in Hebrew, in a way, relates to speaking ill of other people. Okay, we have that. And then we have also all the many times, I think it's like 36 times in the Torah, it says, you shall love your neighbor. You shall have only one law for the stranger who dwells among you and for yourself. And you shall be kind to the stranger and the widow and the orphan, because remember that you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So we have all that. We have this other thing at the same time. So one question is, where does racism come from? Where does race come from? Genetically, in a way, there's no such thing. Us human beings are almost exactly DNA-ish like each other. Okay? And we're almost exactly DNA-ish like chimpanzees, for that matter. The difference between us and the some of the other primates is very, very small. But we're also different from each other genetically. I had when I looked at one time, I'm 96% European Jewish. That's 4% other, okay? That's interesting to me. What is that 4% other? I have ideas about it. I also, sometimes I believe that I've gone through previous incarnations. Personally, I have had a very strong relationship to the First Nations indigenous people. And in my imagination, I spent some time there among my many other travels. Okay? So the whole notion of race is a fiction that we culturally impose on each other for various reasons. One is to strengthen our own sense of self-identity and belonging, okay? And that's not a trivial thing. It's my family, okay? I know who's my family, and I know who's not my family. And I know who's the larger family. I know where the borders are. I know where living on Vancouver Island, we certainly know where the borders are. We have to take a plane or a boat to get anywhere else. So that's an important kind of thing. So creating these fictions has a protective notion for us, as long as it doesn't become something that goes beyond that and then gives me the right to impose my will, my power, generally speaking, on someone else. And that's very, very important. So we can even see this in the pandemic, how this works. What is how the difficult thing also has a positive side. Just like in some ways I learned how to protect myself if necessary, and I learned how to hold my own boundary and not to impose on others. And then later on, doing other work that I've done, I've learned how to listen intensely to other people. And I've learned the breath that I'm speaking, as I'm speaking now, the molecules of air that are coming from me, some of them will eventually end up, some of those molecules randomly in Tahiti or in Africa or somewhere else. And the molecules from the other people that all of you breathing here now are going to be embracing me somehow or another. And that extends to the trees, to the other life. I have to keep that in mind. On the other hand, if you threaten me physically, okay, and that's happened, I have a right to protect myself, and so do you, okay? So we also have another thing that says, I mentioned this already, if the person who ends up being kind to the cruel may end up being cruel to the kind. We have laws to protect us. And those laws, when they're not used discriminately, which they have been in all areas of the world where people have been unjustly subjected to rules of law and had laws used against them in particular because of their racial designation, that's another issue. But when it works if it works fair, then it works. So this pandemic has taught us to be kinder to each other also. Okay. Yeah. So it is now time to say goodbye. I want to thank our hosts very much for allowing us to be here and to talk to each other face to face today.
I want to say thank you for your remarkable frankness in asking some very difficult questions during the course of this. Our next speaker is Dr. Kamala Shukla, who is going to be presenting the Hindi faith perspective. And I'm keeping it really short now because we do have a schedule that we need to keep to.
Hey, let me start my stopwatch.
Oh, excellent.
Will be better.
Okay.
Start. I'm done. So let's see. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I know very well that all of you and whoever listening me, they know much, much more than me how to combat with the racism. But you see, there is a saying, is nani ke aage nansal ki baatein, telling the story of the views. So I'm just telling the story because my friend Mr. Gurdeep always recommend my name to Mr. Rizwan, and they say, okay, come here, say a few words. This is my moral duty to say some words. So we start from here, so don't listen much because they have already said something too much. Let me start from our book. It's not our book, it's a foremost book. It's called the Vedas. And the Vedas English meaning is the books of knowledge. Mistakenly, by less informed people, it is stemmed by this belong to Hindus. No, it's not. If we go to read in Vedas, there is nobody used as a Hindu. They use the human. Because on that time, there was no race, no religion, nothing. We all were the humans. And the Vedas is not at all a religious books. These are the books complete the knowledge how they live. And the four Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samveda, and Atharveda, the four Vedas covers all the science and literature of the society. Whatever you read in the university today, from aeronautical engineering to the plumber, you will find everything there. So that is the Vedas, and it's a misconception. So if I quote something from Vedas, don't think this is from a Hindu perspective. That is for a human perspective. So I have to use something become old and not intended to record more memories here. I'm trying to erase, so I write it here. The Vedas started in the 17,000 years ago, but script they come in 3000 BC. And there is a Maha-Upanishad, and there is a very, very clear quote. Ayam nija paroveti galana lagu chetasam udar charitanam tu vasudaiva kutumbakam. One is my brother, other is not. One belongs to my religion, other is not. These thoughts for the narrow-minded people, illiterate people. For magnanimous people, live with the whole world is one family. So it is written 17,000 years before. So this is the quote from our Vedas. And in that case, when there is no race, then there is no need to combat the racism. We have to keep in mind what is there. There is also very important verses from the Vedas as well. Is a called the, we have two kinds of Sanskrit. Is a language Sanskrit and Prakrit, the nature like the Shakespeare language and the common Shakespeare English or other English. So this is Prakrit, and this is complicated, but I have to read and I say what is it want to say. Tantu tan varan rajso vanuman bihi jyotish madah patho rakshadhya kradan anunvalam bayat jog bamapo manor bhava janya davyam janam. In conclusion, it's saying, oh my son, be a human and behave as a human. Manor bhava, be a human. They never say, be a Hindu. Oh, Hindu, you do this. No. They say, be a human. So they treat everyone as a human. No race, no qualification, no religion, nothing. Only we are all human. We all of us, by mistakenly, made the God, and all God is the man-made God. No God is there. God is supreme power. Nobody can make the God. We stamp the God. This is my God. That is your God. This is man-made God if we go at the verses of our Vedas. Because Vedas say, oh, human. And when the human they say, and they don't say to which God you pray. They say, okay, you do this. It's directives, lives like a human. And what is the human? Who are the human? The humans are those you have to perform the human allied duties. First of all, duties towards your family, duties towards your neighbor, duties towards your nation, duties towards the environment. This is human allied duties. The rest of it is not the human allied duties. So if you're not doing that, you're not human. You have a body of human, but monkey is better than you in the human body because he is not performing human allied duties. The later, the one verses came and Swami Dayanand Saraswati is 1862. He also made a slogan from the Atharva-Ved, Kranavantu Vishwamaryam. The meaning is that be a human and make other person the human to make this word beautiful. The Kranavantu Vishwamaryam. They never say be a Hindu. They say no, be a human and make. So these kind of things be coming, but the races, the religion, the caste, they all run by game of power. Nature created also this game of power to run this environment and this universe. From the virus that we cannot see, you see this virus, it cannot survive. It needs something to survive. So virus and bacteria and up to a whale, they just all grabbing the power. It's a law of nature. The big tree just suck all water from the small tree. So this is the game of power. But there is a limit how much we should use the game of power. For our survival, we have to follow the game of power. We have to play, otherwise we cannot survive. But there is a limit. Without hurting anyone, without harming anyone, if you are collecting your power, then it's okay. You're following the law of nature. But if not, then you are against nature. There is also caste system and something is not there. In Vedas or in our scriptures, you find only the four main classification: the teachers, the warriors, the businessmen, and the skilled worker. If you go nowadays, the universities, they do the skill test. But the skill. So whatever they choose the skill, they say, okay, we are the skilled men. It's not any race there, nothing. So the teacher, if somebody has the knowledge to teach us, they are the teacher. And I can give you an example in history that Valmiki, he belongs to a family who are the worker, a skilled worker. But he has a different knowledge. He has a capacity and a skill to teach. So the Valmiki, he wrote the first poetry on the planet, Ramayana. It has 130,000 verses. So the Valmiki, so from the skilled tradesman, he came to the Valmiki and we say he's the teacher. Next is Ved Vyas. Ved Vyas, born and brought up in a family of a sailor, and he was sailing the boat. But he developed the idea to teach the public. And he wrote the 18 Purana, the 18 big books. And those books give everything, all aspect of life, how we live, and with examples. So the big Vyas wrote the 18 book. When it was sailing the boat, he became the teacher. And some group, they say, oh, you are like a god. And there is one conclusion, one saying in that Ved Vyas, Ashtadas Purana Vyasasya Vachanadvayam, Paropkarai Punyai Papai Parpidam. On out of all 18th books, the Ved Vyas give only one directive. The best good thing to help the needy, and the worst thing to hurt someone else. This is the conclusion of Ved Vyas. Oh, almost done. That's good. So it's not much. So you see, the Hindu and other things is all made by humans. And if really we want to bring some changes, we don't need to go anywhere for combat. We have to combat ourselves. It's a saying, I have a body, I'm not a body. So listen your eye. Our eye always protect you, hold you to the wrong things. So just correct yourself. There is no need to say go anywhere. You say 30 seconds more. Swami Vivekananda, he gave the lecture in the Chicago in 1883, and one person said, hey Saint, you have any formula or solution to bring the peace out there? He said, no, sorry, I don't have, but I have one formula for me. I started living with peace and harmony. So there is no need to combat anywhere. Don't need to criticize anyone. Just correct ours. Thank you very much. God bless all. Thank you.
Whoops. Sorry, having a little personal technical difficulties here. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, you definitely need that. Absolutely. So for our last speaker this evening, and I'm relying on others to do the technical components of this, we have Dr. Annalie Dreisen, who's going to be representing the metaphysical approach to spirituality, and she is coming in to us via Zoom. So Annalie, welcome. No, that's not Annalie. He's managing the. There you go. You're on.
Well, thank you very much. Just a moment. When I first heard about today's subject, I thought, what in the world am I going to say about this? As it is so obvious that we are all loved equally by God. Our metaphysical denomination is inclusive and faith-friendly. We believe in incarnation. This means that we are, as a human species, here a number of times incarnating inside all races and cultures as men and women and everything in between.
Brush your teeth in less than 10 seconds.
We brush our teeth too. It is therefore highly probable that we not only have been at least once victimized by racial issues during this life, but possibly in previous ones as well. We even may have been the perpetrators and carry memories with us in our subconscious. We also believe that we are here on this planet to learn, and that we may need to be here as often as it takes to get our act together. What this means and how we go about this is something we comprehensively address in the Metaphysical Academy. In this process, we purify our souls and eventually will be reunited once again with our original source, God. As metaphysicians, we refer to this God by many names, such as universal intelligence, all that is, great spirit, almighty, supreme power, or many other names that describe this creative force or energy. In reality, we believe we cannot properly comprehend and describe it anyway. We can only reach it to some degree through knowledge and our intuition. In addition, every human being has a unique understanding and relationship with the divine. But back to racism. The growing awareness of this issue now reflects more and more diversity and inclusion initiatives and policies globally. It is a step in the right direction to minimize racism, as there is no way to create a non-pluralized homogeneous society, especially since tests, as someone mentioned already, today revealed that many of us have several genealogical roots. Governments, as well as businesses, need to continue to be a guarantor for a pluralistic and respectful coexistence. Among other things, this requires benevolent neutrality or goodwill for spaces for all forms of cultures and religious faith. But I think that racism has much deeper intrapersonal levels that need to be addressed by abandoning our claims to our own superiority and righteousness. I want to share with you a personal example. Some time ago, I attended a 5-day, very intensive leadership conference in Key West. We were 12 people, 10 men, 2 women. There was an attractive, lovely blonde woman. At the time, we both were probably in our 40s. I really liked her. She was beautiful. She was attractive. She had beautiful demeanor. She also wore a little Star of David, a golden necklace. I didn't make a connection initially, but as I said, I really liked her. We didn't talk much, but in about the 3rd day, she met with me in the bathroom. I was just washing my hands and touching up makeup or whatever I was doing. And she came up to me and said, "Can I talk with you for a minute?" I said, "Sure." And she looked at me and said, and then she started to cry. She said, "You know, I really like you, but I hate you because you're German." And I just looked at her and I felt really helpless. I didn't really know what to say. And she cried more, and I felt her pain, and I cried. And I think I also felt national pain, something that is deep-rooted in our history. She proceeded to tell me that she was by birth not Jewish. She's American. She married a Jewish man. And she learned all about how terrible we are as Germans and what horrible things we did, et cetera, et cetera. And so we wound up in each other's arms crying. And we didn't talk much after. I don't even remember her name, and we never had contact after. But I remember this very, very vividly, and how it really made a difference in my life. Well, one of the things that I was reflecting on when I prepared for today was what this woman showed was something I think we all need to do, and that is self-honesty. We need to ask ourselves, is there a culture or race I have a hard time with, don't like, or even despise? Why is that? We may have had an unpleasant experience during this life, or perhaps in a previous one. Maybe we once were victimized by them, or we have been, in fact, the aggressor ourselves. This lady showed humility and courage. And when I looked at the poster that we had for this conference, and I saw, the fists in combating racism, I thought, this is not how we're going to do it. We cannot create change with force. So what do we do individually to minimize or even let go of racism that we may carry deep in our hearts without merely consciously acknowledging it? I suggest we work on ourselves first. Maybe we need the help from a practitioner, or maybe from a spiritual guidance, maybe a minister, maybe a good coach. But what if we don't know about the roots, the causes of our discomfort or dislike of another culture or race, because they are hidden in our subconscious. It still can be done. For example, we have a process in the academy which allows us to free ourselves from old blockages and imprints, even from those we no longer consciously remember. And they work. And then we need to forgive ourselves and others. It's a process. It doesn't just happen like that. It might, but it might not be. It might be something that goes like a peel of an onion that takes repetition and time. But it does require our commitment to do it. In summary, freeing ourselves from racism is a societal and intrapersonal necessity and responsibility. It is founded in the belief in man as a self-determined subject, equally valued by God. It is an ethos based on love that calls us to meet each other in love and humility, which is constitutive in our common and spiritual laws. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annalie. Before we get to concluding remarks, I'm going to call on Rizwan to deal with thanking all of our very important guests for bringing us to this point with important information about combating racism and how it interacts with our spiritual lives. So Rizwan, if you could move us on to the next phase here.
Thank you very much, Counselor. You know, as a token of appreciation, we try to do some little thing can please you, but not much. I mean, it won't make you wealthy, but might make you happy. So I request Regional President, Mr. Naeem Lakhan, to please come and start presenting these gifts. So I will ask him to stand in front of here. So we have a second camera, my cell phone on. And so we have a new director. And so please, you can stand here, and I will request each from, starting from Father Mendoza, to please come and see this small gift of appreciation.
I can go to everyone.
Yeah. So the camera has to run with you then. Now I request our good friend Gurdeep Singh to please come and receive the gift of appreciation. And followed by Rabbi, please.
I can go there.
You know, this
Thank you.
now. That's okay, because this is more like a Uber service going on in your house. You know, you will appreciate that delivery coming to you.
Thank you.
Oh, so this is for our moderator. Thank you very much.
This is a big one?
Yeah, don't say that. It should be confidential. And Counselor, we have one speaker which is on, Dr. Robert Joseph also. So I'll send them a gift directly at their homes. So that's it. Dr. Robert Joseph, sorry about that. You're not here, so I have to mail you, and Dr. Nelly also. So sorry about that. I do have a gift for you. Yes, thank you. So that concludes my session from here, and thank you very much for all of you. Now we have a small session going on in the last minute. I request my speaker panels, Pastor Saab, please let him go. Yeah. We will have a group photograph in the end. Also, please stay here. And before we do that, we have a small thing to do that, which our moderator will do that. I'll request moderator, Councillor Harper, to carry on the agenda, and then we will conclude the event.
Thank you, Rizwan. So first of all, I wanted to thank everyone for your presentations. I know how much time and energy it takes to put presentations together, and for being understanding when the sign came up that said that time was coming to an end, because we did have a very strict schedule to try to adhere to. And I would say that we did adhere to it because we started late. So you guys did your job. That was excellent. So big thank you on every count. Thank you. And just as we're closing off the session, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that, again, having been present and been allowed to participate in a very small way in one of these sessions, it's very clear to me again how similar we all are in both our beliefs and in our humanity. And I always remain puzzled at the end of these things on some level that we have problems that we do have in the world, given that, in fact, to me, it's so clear that whether it's from our faiths or from our interactions, that we have so much more in common than we do. Differences. So it's very clear that both individually and organizationally, it's imperative that we speak up in the face of racism, hatred, and prejudice whenever and wherever it occurs. And ironically, as we stand here today, and you've seen a lot of masks and me taking mine off and on every time I've been coming up, COVID has done a couple of things. One of the things it's done is it's exposed the fault lines in our world, that some of us were altogether too comfortable that we were in a relatively good place, and it's made it clear that there's still a lot of work yet to be done. But from a positive point of view, and I guess ultimately I am an optimist of some sort, COVID also has provided us with an opportunity to make the changes that need to be made, because it's so clear what needs to be fixed in our society, whether it's our relationships with one another, whether it's to do with the environment, or any of those things. And so it's provided us with an opportunity that I can only hope we as humanity will take, because we're getting to the point where we really need to make these kinds of choices. So there's lots of work yet to do, and I want to thank the organizers for bringing us together to help us once again share our ideas and how we can be working together with one another. So lots of work to do. So let's get going and do it. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Do you want that call for this?
No.
Oh, so some of the people who've been watching are in LA, Guyana, Prince Edward Island. So we are reaching out to a lot of people. So that is truly quite remarkable. So thank you. So I think if that is appropriate, I can. Do we have another speaker? Sorry, I got called in sort of at the last minute. Is this the end or the last?
Yeah, this is the one.
Okay, so I thought. So I would actually like to call on the president of AMJ Victoria, Dr. Mansour Ogunbadi. We'll see if my pronunciation still holds true, to have a vote of thanks. And this would be, they online. Okay, yay, here we go with another technical challenge. There we go.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just want to thank everyone for participating, right from the moderator and all the speakers. I think this is my first time of hosting this session in Victoria, and fortunately it's online. And I think one advantage, like the moderator mentioned earlier, is that with this COVID, we're able to do online, and a lot of people can be able to join. So on behalf of the my Jama'at members in Victoria, I just want to thank everyone from the regional president to Brother Rizwan. Thank you, and all the delegation from Vancouver. I want to thank everyone. Thank you.
So this is it. Thank you very much for all those are online. May God bless you. Peace and blessings upon you, and see you soon again.